Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow walk through the quiet corners of history, the kind your teacher probably called boring. But don't worry, you probably won't survive this kind of boredom, because behind every dull treaty, silent calendar reform, and polite political meeting, there were riots, deaths, and ghosts of consequence that never really left. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on that soft fan hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander into an ancient scriptorium, the sound of quills scratching, parchment rustling. Monks whisper dates and laws that feel meaningless, but history has a strange sense of humor. Because somewhere, in one of these boring records, humanity accidentally signed its own curse. The first of them starts with something as dull as a calendar. You glance at an old clock tower, frozen at midnight. In 1752, Britain decided to fix its calendar to match the rest of Europe. A harmless reform, right? Just aligning dates. But overnight, 11 days vanished. People went to bed on September 2nd and woke up on September 14th. Crowds rioted, screaming, "Give us back our days." They thought they'd been robbed of their lives, of wages, birthdays, even death anniversaries. You can almost hear them, torches in hand, demanding time itself to be returned. What's funny is, scholars still argue whether those riots truly happened, or whether panic spread faster than the truth. But one thing's certain, humanity learned that even timekeeping could turn deadly. Now imagine, you're living then. One day just disappears. No sunrise on the 3rd, no 4th, no 5th. Nothing until the 14th. Would you feel cheated, or scared that something unnatural just happened? That's the beauty of history's boring side. It's never really boring once you step inside. And as you stand there in that candlelit crowd, people screaming into the lost night, you realize this isn't just about dates. It's about control. The church wanted to fix time. The king wanted to control the calendar. The people wanted their lives back. Even boredom, you see, has politics. Section 2. The tax that killed a nation. You walk through a narrow alley that smells faintly of dust, sweat, and copper coins. It's quiet, too quiet. Somewhere ahead, a man's voice mutters about salt. You follow the sound, and soon the silence turns heavy with tension. Salt. Just a pinch of it, right? Harmless, ordinary. You use it every day, sprinkle it on your food, maybe even take it for granted. But in the 18th century France, salt wasn't just seasoning. It was power. The gabelle, they called it, the salt tax. And it was so despised that people whispered its name like a curse. Everyone needed salt, but not everyone could afford it. The poor paid heavily, while the rich found ways to avoid it. Guards patrolled borders to stop smugglers, and being caught with untaxed salt could mean prison, or worse. You imagine yourself there, standing by a moonlit river, clutching a small sack of salt under your cloak. You can hear dogs barking in the distance. The night smells of fear. You're not a criminal, just someone trying to keep your family alive. When the revolution finally came, they didn't shout about salt, but the bitterness was still there. Every drop of sweat, every grain of injustice had already soaked into the soil. The gabble wasn't just a tax, it was the quiet poison that eroded faith in the crown. Scholars still argue whether the salt tax alone could have toppled a monarchy, but the truth, it didn't have to. It just had to remind people that their hunger was being measured. You walk further, and in the flicker of torchlight, you see a family huddled together, boiling soup without salt, because to season, it would be a crime. Somewhere outside, the guards march past, their boots echoing through the cobbled streets, enforcing laws that made no sense. And it hits you, how history's dullest details hide the loudest screams. Taxes, tariffs, treaties, boring, right? But to the people living them, they were fire. It's easy to forget that revolutions don't start with gunshots. They start when a mother looks at her empty table and realizes she's paying for her king's perfume instead of her child's meal. You move through the crowd again, past the smell of fear, past the echoes of revolt. Someone drops a handful of white grains into the dirt. The guards look away. That's how nations fall, not with swords, but with silence. Section 3. The treaty that erased a country. You wander through a grand hall lit by dying candles. The air feels heavy, almost respectful of the ghosts it holds. Scrolls, quills, wax seals. Everything smells of parchment and power. This is where the world was redrawn, quietly, by men in powdered wigs, who never had to walk the land they divided. A treaty. Boring, right? A few signatures, some maps, and a long list of names no one remembers. But in 1772, a treaty did something unthinkable. It erased Poland. You can almost see them at the table, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. 3 empires leaning in, slicing a nation apart like a loaf of bread. No cannons, no blood in the streets, just ink. The kind of evil that hides behind politeness. One diplomat sips wine, another dabs his lips. They talk about borders, balance, strategy. And somewhere outside, in the snow-covered plains, millions of people stop being Polish overnight. You picture it. Your home, your village, your name, gone, replaced by a new flag. You wake up the next morning and realize your country doesn't exist anymore. No war, no warning. Just a treaty signed in another language, in another room. Scholars still argue whether the Polish partitions were inevitable, the result of weak kings or greedy neighbors. But that's the thing about history. It always sounds inevitable once it's written down. You move closer to the diplomats. Their faces are calm, detached. They talk about numbers, not people. One laughs softly, another yawns. They're dividing 1,000 years of heritage with the same energy you'd use to slice a pie. The candlelight flickers, and for a moment, you think you hear something under their voices. A low, distant hum. The sound of a nation grieving. Later, when the wax has hardened and the ink dried, the hall empties. The chairs are left crooked, papers stacked neatly. But outside, a storm begins. Soldiers march under strange flags. Maps are redrawn, villages renamed, and the people, oh the people, wake to find their loyalty outlawed. You think about how often this happens, how treaties are just weapons with nicer handwriting, how a few quiet signatures can do what 1,000 soldiers can't. History calls it diplomacy. You might call it theft. As you leave the hall, you look back once more. The candles are still burning, the table still gleaming under gold chandeliers. But the world outside that room, it's never the same again. Section 4. The church rules that broke the body. You step into a vast stone hall that smells faintly of incense, old books, and candle smoke. Rows of flickering lamps stretch toward a marble altar where a robed priest murmurs words in Latin. The air feels sacred, but also suffocating. You find a worn parchment nailed to a wooden post. It's filled with rules, not about faith or salvation, but about your body. In medieval Europe, the church wasn't just your spiritual guide. It was your doctor, your dietitian, your personal timekeeper. And it decided everything. When to eat, what to eat, when to wash, when to sleep with your spouse. It even dictated when you could bathe. To modern ears, it sounds dull. just religious regulation. But for the people who lived under it, these rules shaped their flesh and bones. During Lent, meat was banned for 40 days. Fish became a symbol of purity, but good luck finding enough of it if you were poor. In some towns, eating butter during Lent could get you fined, or even excommunicated. Scholars still argue whether these restrictions were meant for health, faith, or control. But the effect was clear. Hunger wasn't a sin. Disobedience was. You imagine walking through a medieval village. The baker's ovens are cold. The butcher's stall stands empty. Yet the taverns smell faintly of forbidden stew, hidden meals for desperate souls. People whisper about secret feasts, about monks who sneak meat under cloaks, about fish merchants who grow rich selling salvation by the pound. And then came the fasting laws, so complex that even priests struggled to keep track. No meat on Fridays, no dairy on certain days, no eggs during Lent. The church calendar turned into a maze of guilt and hunger. You picture yourself sitting by a flickering candle, staring at a bowl of cold peas, praying for the day you can eat something warm again. There's a strange kind of pain in that obedience. It wasn't war, it wasn't plague, but it was control, quiet, relentless control, over the most basic human need. One rule even dictated how people could sleep. Monks were told to wake at midnight for prayers, breaking their rest into fragments. Ordinary villagers copied this pattern. The night became two halves, first sleep and second sleep, with a waking hour in between to pray or sin. Yes, even in their rest, the church's rules reached into their dreams. You close your eyes and hear the bells toll, soft, haunting, eternal. Somewhere a monk coughs in the dark, his stomach empty, but his conscience clean. It's funny how history calls these details boring. But in those rules of food, sleep, and flesh, entire generations were shaped. Their bones were lighter, their tempers shorter, their faith heavier. You walk toward the altar and see something carved into the stone. Discipline is divine. You trace it with your fingers and it feels cold, like the kind of devotion that doesn't ask for your soul, but your body too. And as the candles flicker out one by one, the hall grows darker, until only the echo of those rules remains, soft, distant, and eternal. Section 5. The Forgotten Healers. When medicine was a sin. You're standing in a dim cobblestone alley, moonlight brushing against weathered walls. A whisper echoes, "She heals with herbs." And suddenly, torches flare. In the 14th century, medicine wasn't just science, it was heresy. If you healed someone with herbs, you weren't a doctor, you were a witch. Before hospitals, before anatomy books, healing was women's work, quiet, hidden, passed from mother to daughter. They knew what bark soothed fever, what root stopped bleeding. But when the church grew powerful, their hands became dangerous. Because if illness came from God, then healing without his permission was rebellion. You imagine a woman kneeling beside a sick child. She grinds herbs into a paste, murmuring prayers, not to saints, but to the earth. Outside, the priest watches. Tomorrow, she'll be questioned. By Sunday, she'll be burned. The church declared the body sacred, but untouchable. Dissecting a corpse was blasphemy. Studying anatomy, forbidden. Doctors couldn't even look inside the human form they were supposed to heal. So they guessed. They read Galen, an ancient Greek physician who never saw a human body, only animals, and they trusted him more than their own eyes. A man with a fever, they'd bleed him. A woman fainted. Must be wandering womb. A bad cough. The humours were unbalanced. Time for leeches. You can almost hear the sound of blood dripping into a brass bowl, the doctor muttering a prayer as he hopes the soul stays intact. Meanwhile, in hidden corners of villages, real healers worked in shadows. Women mixed herbs in clay bowls, wrapped wounds in moss, whispered to rivers, and somehow they healed. But healing outside the church's walls meant you were working with the devil. The same herbs that cured fever one day became evidence of witchcraft the next. Hundreds of wise women were dragged through town squares, their baskets of herbs spilled into the mud. Their crime, knowing too much, their sin, caring too deeply. And so, medicine went underground. For centuries, people prayed louder instead of learning better. You see a young monk now sneaking into a monastery cellar, hiding a human skeleton beneath his robes. He lights a candle and studies the bones in silence. His face trembles, not with fear, but with awe. He's not defying God. He's discovering his design. That monk's name will be lost to time, but his secret will ignite the Renaissance. For every healer burned, a question remained, and that question refused to die. You walk through the alley again, where the torches once burned. It's silent now. The air smells faintly of rosemary and ash. A single parchment flutters on the wall. It reads, "To heal the body is not to defy God, but to understand his work." And for the first time you realize, the war between faith and knowledge wasn't fought with swords. It was fought with fear and courage.
Section 6. The Era of Forbidden Flesh. When Desire Became Disease. A cold silence fills the old cathedral halls. Candles flicker, shadows stretch across the stone floor, and behind the confessional curtain, someone whispers, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." But the sin wasn't murder. It wasn't theft. It was simply desire. Welcome to the age of moral purity, when the human body itself became a battlefield between temptation and salvation. Here, even a glance could condemn you. In 17th century Europe, pleasure was treated like poison. Doctors claimed too much desire could cause blindness, madness, even death. The church warned, every lustful thought is a spark from hell. So they built a society terrified of its own reflection. Men were told not to touch themselves. Women were told not to look at their bodies. And if either disobeyed, medicine would punish them in the name of health. You see a man sitting in a candlelit room, trembling as he ties a strange metal belt around his waist. A chastity device made to save his soul. Invented not for protection, but suppression. Doctors began writing manuals on how to prevent sin, not with prayer, but with instruments. Cold steel rings, straps, and locks were sold in markets as moral cures. Parents bought them for their children. In the corners of monasteries, monks whipped their own backs, not for crime, but for desire, blood dripping down their robes as if pain could wash away thought. The Victorian era took it even further. Love became science, a dangerous one. They believed emotions could be diagnosed and sexuality treated like an illness. A woman who spoke too freely? Hysteria. A man who showed affection? Deviant. Doctors prescribed cold baths, electric shocks, and sometimes surgery. They tried to cut out what they didn't understand. Imagine walking through a hospital ward in 1880. White sheets, pale faces, and on each bed, someone being punished for feeling human. Even art was censored. Painters were told to drape marble statues, covering curves with fabric. The body, once seen as divine, became indecent. But the more they tried to erase it, the louder it pulsed beneath the silence. In the dark corners of that repressed world, poets began to rebel. They wrote verses about forbidden touch, whispered love, and midnight sins. Every word was a quiet revolution, proof that desire could never be destroyed, only buried. You can almost hear one of them scribbling by candlelight. They told me love was sickness, but I have never felt more alive. And perhaps that's the heart of it. The era that called desire a disease accidentally revealed something eternal. No matter how deep the shame, no matter how many rules or punishments, human longing always finds a way to survive. You walk out of that candlelit hall, past the confessional, past the iron belts displayed like trophies. The night air feels warmer now. For the first time, it feels okay to breathe. As the music fades, a whisper lingers. They feared the body because they never understood the soul that lived within it. And with that, the curtain closes, leading us quietly into the next forbidden realm of history. The taste of sin when food became a moral crime. Section 7. The taste of sin when food became a moral crime. The smell of roasted meat drifts through an old market square. Bells toll in the distance. But here's the catch. In this town, you could be jailed for eating dinner on the wrong day. Welcome to an age when food was not just nourishment, it was morality on a plate. In medieval Europe, the church decided what, when, and how you could eat. Every bite was a spiritual test. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. No meat. Sundays, only blessed bread and wine. If you dared to break it, eternal damnation, or at least a hefty fine. A poor farmer once caught roasting chicken on a Friday was publicly whipped because flesh leads to sin. But the irony? The rich feasted behind closed doors, claiming medical exemption. In monasteries, monks ate in silence, heads bowed over bowls of lentils. No laughter, no chewing too loud. If one monk's stomach growled during prayer, it was seen as a whisper from the devil. By the 13th century, the rules got stranger. In Venice, butter was banned during Lent, unless you paid a fee for a butter permit. They even built butter towers beside cathedrals to store all the contraband fat. Yes, they taxed temptation. Then came the 16th century, when food became a symbol of rebellion. Protestants began eating meat on forbidden days just to defy the church. The dinner table became a battlefield, each meal a declaration of faith or defiance. One bishop called it the War of the Kitchen. Imagine soldiers praying before battle, then sharing banned sausages as if taking communion. But not all laws were holy. In Japan's Edo period, meat was outlawed entirely. Not for religion, but for purity. The emperor claimed it made people beast-like. Those caught selling it in secret risked execution. Yet underground butchers thrived, calling beef medicine to hide its scent of rebellion. And across Europe, new fears emerged. Chocolate was accused of seducing nuns. Coffee was banned in Mecca in the 16th century for being the drink of the devil. Tea was called foreign corruption in France. Every sip, every bite was now a moral decision. Food had become sin itself. But human appetite always wins. Secret feasts bloomed behind locked doors. Priests who condemned meat by day dined on roasted lamb by night, because deep down, even the holy are hungry. One anonymous diary from 1614 read, "We prayed all day for forgiveness, and then ate like kings at midnight. As centuries passed, these rules faded, but their echo remains, in diets, in shame, in the way we still whisper, cheat meal, like confession. You close your eyes and you can almost hear the echoes of clinking cups, whispered laughter, forbidden tastes. They feared indulgence, but what they truly feared was freedom. Because once a person tastes freely, they start to think freely. So tonight, as the candles dim and the markets sleep, imagine those hidden banquets. The laughter, the risk, the flavor of rebellion itself. And when the next episode begins, we'll leave the dinner table behind and step into a stranger room. The laws of sleep, when dreams were policed.
Section 8. The laws of sleep. When dreams were policed. The night has grown deeper now. You walk through a narrow cobblestone street where every window glows faintly with candlelight. The air smells of wax and damp stone. Somewhere in the distance, a town bell strikes midnight. And with that sound, you step into one of the strangest laws in human history, when sleep itself became regulated. You might laugh, But there was a time when even your dreams belonged to the government. In the 16th century Europe, towns enforced curfews so strict that stepping outside after sunset was considered an act of rebellion. The church claimed that ungodly thoughts were born in the darkness, so sleeping at the wrong hour could mark you as possessed. You imagine standing at your window, candle flickering, knowing that if you so much as whispered after 9 p.m., the guards might knock on your door. It wasn't fear of ghosts that haunted the night. It was fear of the law. And yet, humans being humans, we broke those rules constantly. Lovers sneaked through alleys. Scholars read forbidden books under blankets. Bakers lit ovens at dawn and were fined for premature activity. A royal decree in 1627 even dictated that servants must sleep on their right side, because left side sleeping was thought to cause lustful dreams. Imagine a guard actually checking that. One 17th century record from Florence describes a woman being punished because she slept in an unholy posture. You sigh. How exhausting it must have been to even rest correctly. Then came the 2 sleeps. Before industrial time, humans slept in 2 shifts. The first sleep and the second sleep. You'd sleep for 4 hours, wake around midnight, pray, make love, or even visit neighbors, then go back to bed. It was normal, peaceful, until the 19th century. Factories needed control, workers needed schedules, and suddenly, segmented sleep was labeled lazy and immoral. By 1820, industrialists and preachers had united. Early to bed, early to rise became not advice, but command. The natural rhythm of humanity was outlawed, reshaped into a machine's timetable. But the weirdest part? In certain Puritan colonies, dreams themselves were investigated. If you confessed to sinful dreams, you could be forced into prayer camps or public repentance. A young man in Massachusetts once reported dreaming of dancing and was sentenced to 3 days of fasting. The logic was simple. If you dream it, your soul meant it. Scholars still argue whether these dream tribunals were symbolic or literal, but court records suggest at least 4 trials where people were punished for thoughts while asleep. In Japan's Edo period, the opposite happened. Dreams were treated as divine prophecy, so powerful that samurai couldn't act on a dream without official permission. If a samurai dreamed of victory, he had to report it to his superior, who determined whether the dream came from the gods or madness. One wrong report could lead to seppuku, ritual suicide. So yes, even dreams needed a bureaucratic stamp. You walk now through the imagined streets of a sleeping city, every window dark, every breath measured by invisible rules. Above you, stars glimmer like faint lanterns, and you wonder, how did we take something as pure as sleep and turn it into sin, law, and punishment? In one medieval chronicle, a monk wrote, "The devil comes in dreams, but so does God. It is the waking man who cannot tell them apart. And isn't that the truth? The mind doesn't obey kings or priests. It drifts where it pleases, into memories, fantasies, regrets. Maybe that's why they feared it. Dreams were freedom, the kind no government could ever fully tax or tame." As you continue walking, the sound of your own footsteps echoes softly. You pass a shuttered bakery, a sleeping horse, a lantern swaying in the breeze. The world is at rest, but your thoughts wander. How many revolutions began in dreams? How many poets, rebels, and lovers woke with an idea that changed everything? Because the law couldn't reach inside their minds. You smile faintly. The night belongs to no one. And that's the most illegal thing of all. So, next time you drift off, remember, once upon a time, sleep was a crime. And dreaming was defiance. Now, close your eyes, breathe slow, and imagine what it would feel like to break every rule, simply by resting. Section 9. The Laws of Love, when marriage was a weapon. You walk beneath a row of crumbling arches, the air thick with the scent of wilted roses and old parchment. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls for a wedding, though it sounds more like a warning. Love, in our age, feels free. You meet, you fall, you decide. But once upon a time, love was not yours to keep. It was a transaction, a bargain, a law. You pass a couple in fine velvet, the groom old enough to be her grandfather, the bride barely 16. Neither of them looks happy. In medieval Europe, marriage was a contract between families, not hearts. Dowries, land, alliances, these were the true vows, and if love tried to sneak in, it was often punished. By the 12th century, the Catholic Church began tightening its grip. They declared marriage a sacrament, unbreakable. No divorce, no freedom. Even if your husband vanished for years, you were bound. Your body, your name, your future. Scholars still argue whether this law protected women or imprisoned them. But records show thousands of petitions from wives begging for annulments, citing cruelty, abandonment, even madness, and being denied. Then came the law of consent. Sounds progressive, right? In the 13th century, the church ruled that consent was required for marriage. But here's the twist. A single spoken yes could seal your fate forever. So when two teenagers whispered promises in a field, those words could be used as evidence in court that they were married, even if their families objected. Love letters became legal documents. Imagine your DMs being used as marriage proof. Yeah, love was dangerous. You turned down another path, this one lined with torches and banners. In ancient Rome, Emperor Augustus enforced the Lex Julia, a set of moral laws so strict they could exile you for staying single too long. Marriage wasn't just social, it was patriotic. The state wanted babies, soldiers, taxpayers, citizens. If you refused to marry, you paid extra taxes. If you committed adultery, exile. Even his own daughter Julia was punished under these laws. The emperor's child, banished for loving the wrong man. Across the world, similar chains appeared in different forms. In 18th century China, widows who remarried were branded unfilial. In Victorian England, women lost all property the moment they said "I do." Their wages, land, even children, legally belonged to their husbands. Marriage was less a union and more a surrender. You picture a young woman standing before a magistrate, signing her name for the last time as a free person. The ink dries, and so does her autonomy. And love beyond the norm? Unthinkable. Same-sex relationships were not just illegal, they were erased. The first recorded execution for homosexuality in medieval Europe was in 1276. 2 men burned for unnatural affection. Their names never recorded, their ashes scattered in silence. Even lovers who simply didn't match in class or race risked death. In colonial America, interracial marriage was a capital crime. In 1664 Maryland, it was punishable by slavery. Yes, love could literally enslave you. But love, as always, found ways to rebel. Secret marriages, coded letters, nighttime escapes. A noblewoman disguising herself as a man to reach her lover across enemy lines. A poor farmer carving his beloved's initials inside a church pew, so their union would at least exist in God's house, if not in man's law. The deeper you walk into these stories, the more you realize something. The history of marriage isn't about romance. It's about control. Who owns your body? Who defines your worth? Who decides if your love is lawful? And maybe that's why modern love feels so intense. Because every kiss, every choice, every "I love you" is an act of defiance against centuries of permission slips and punishments. A wind passes through the corridor, and a faded wedding veil flutters across your path. You pick it up, light as air, but heavy with ghosts. The faint smell of lavender, the echo of vows whispered by candlelight. And as you let it drift away, you can almost hear the voices of all those who loved in secret, and all those who paid for it. Love, it turns out, has always been a crime worth committing. Next, we'll step even deeper into control, beyond marriage, into the laws of silence when words were forbidden. Because sometimes what you couldn't say was more dangerous than what you did. If history felt alive tonight, imagine what else still sleeps in its shadows. Don't forget to subscribe to After Dark Historica, where every forgotten page of history comes alive once again.